What's up, everybody? This is Ethan coming to you with a Florida Gators off-season recap. Gonna do a little recruiting roundup. Haven't had a chance to stream lately. Joined Mitch and Matt the other day for a Behind the Hedges Gators preview, but didn't really get a chance to dive into the Gators like I wanted to. It's been kind of an odd off season in that we haven't had any notable events, no tay bangs, no credit card schemes. It's been kind of unsettling, a little unnerving as a Florida fan following the pandemic. Kind of wanted things to get back to normal, but I guess I'll take this as a little Pyrrhic victory, maybe. When we are out scheming, that's usually when we have our best team. So kind of a mixed bag there. But in all seriousness, the only thing that we've really had to talk about this offseason, and it was covered pretty extensively, is the whole Eric Gilbert scenario. My personal take on it, we didn't lose Eric Gilbert because we never had Eric Gilbert. Eric Gilbert has never taken a snap for the Florida Gators. He didn't make it to campus, and he didn't practice with us. As far as I'm concerned, Kamori Gamble, Keon Zipperer, we have a couple of new freshmen coming in. We got Jonathan Odom as a more stereotypical H-back, kind of inline blocker, slight receiver threat. Our tight end room's good. Eric Gilbert would have been a massive haul, a massive improvement for our tight end room, just like he will for almost anybody else in the country. But he's not Kyle Pitts. Sophomore Kyle Pitts was not junior Kyle Pitts. So saying that freshman Eric Gilbert is going to be junior Kyle Pitts is a bit laughable. But I'm not really going to dive too deep into it. From everything I've seen, it's been a grades issue. Same thing happened to him at LSU. From what it seems like is he just left LSU, didn't take care of his grades on his way out, and that's going to really make it hard for him to transfer, especially within the SEC. I know Florida fans like to pretend that we have Harvard-level admission requirements. We don't, especially not for athletes, just like every other public school in the country. Your Stanfords and Vanderbilts and Rices and Tulanes, and they might have slightly higher requirements for their athletes than any other schools, but Florida, if we want to get an athlete in and he meets the minimum NCAA requirements, he's getting in. Transfers are a little bit different because of the statistics requirement that's gotten a lot of our JUCO recruits over the years. Big news is DeJuan Black has apparently made it through the course offering. I believe he was at Seminole Community College. I'm not sure. I have to check. But let me check on that real quick, actually. Dead air. It's beautiful, I know. But DeJuan Black, he's a kid that signed with us back in 2018. He was one of Dan Mullen's original full classes. He didn't qualify along with Diavai Hammond, and Wardrick Wilson had been dealing with a visa issue pretty much from the jump. We all thought it was going to be resolved. Didn't happen. Then he goes JUCO while they work on the visa issue. Still hasn't gotten it resolved as far as I know, and I don't believe that we have extended that offer back to him. So I'm not sure what the situation is with him, but so DeJuan Black went to Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College, so he was playing some football while he was waiting to get his grades straight and get back to Florida. But the dude, I will do a separate stream on probably 10 to 20 of our freshmen that are in. I'd like to do some quick roundups and then kind of introduce you guys to our roster, get some content out there, quick 10, 15-minute previews of what the Gators are going to have on both sides of the ball in the coming season. As many of you know, 2020, we had one of our best offenses in school history. Our defense was a huge letdown, and it cost us multiple games. Todd Grantham and co are still around. It does seem like if you haven't had a chance to watch This is the Swamp, definitely go watch it. You get a little bit of insight with Donovan McMillan and Chief Borders, two of our freshman recruits. That Donovan McMillan, I'm expecting to make a pretty big impact early on. Safety is just a huge need for us. Even before Sean Davis graduated. Sean Davis Kind of reminds me a little bit of that Marcus May, Keanu Neal type of safety. He's a big hitter, not so much of a ball hawk, but he can make plays on it. I expect him to be, a mid to late round draft pick. He has some good tools, but safety, he was more of our strong safety, free safety, kind of rotated back and forth. But by the end of the season, Trey Dean and Trayvez Johnson had kind of taken over those safety roles. We have that star position that kind of a mix of a nickel and a safety. So there's a lot of rotation, a lot of position flexibility in Grantham's defense. It's been a bit of a gift and a curse, but Sean Davis is going to be missed. But other than that, our secondary needs to be totally retooled, and it seems like that's where we are. We lost Ron English and Torian Gray. We showed them the door. They were our safeties and corners coach, respectively. Brought in Crime Dog McGriff from Auburn and Jules Montanar from USF. You get to see a little bit of those in the This Is the Swamp episode as well. And it's definitely interesting. It's definitely good to see Kyer Elam and Trey Dean and some of the, Jaden Hill, some of these guys that have been through multiple coaches, multiple position coaches, and hear them talk about how Montanar and Crime Dog are bringing new tools to their skill set. I think it's kind of telling. I thought Dorian Gray was a smashing success his first time around. Left, I believe he went to the Falcons, Redskins maybe. I'm not entirely sure, but he left to go to the NFL for a year. That didn't work out, got shown the door, and then he came back to Mullen's staff after, I forget what assistant it was that left, but we had an assistant leave, and he slid right into the corners role. In terms of assistant coaches, we still have Christian Robinson as our linebackers coach. It's a bit of a catch-22 with him. He's a young, exciting position coach. He's definitely handcuffed to Grantham. Wherever Grantham goes, he's going to go. But also, he's our best recruiter, so we kind of have to keep him on staff. Okay. All right. So I have my assistant streamer here. But so he Torian Gray, I'm trying to remember where I was. I got totally sidetracked. Christian Robinson. So Christian Robinson is actually a former Georgia player. The thought process has always been that he's going to leave and go to Georgia. It hasn't happened yet. Georgia hasn't needed or wanted him yet. So we'll see how that's going to hold. 1 second. Okay. All right. So we thought we were losing him to Michigan. That was a bit of the off-season turmoil, I guess, and he ended up sticking it out. That fell through. Kind of a weird situation. I'll have to look into that. Maybe have a little bit more insight on the next stream. But then our offensive staff has been very consistent. The only guy that we've had change, Brian Johnson left to go be the quarterbacks coach for the Philadelphia Eagles. He was a big part of our offensive success in 2020. Brought in a lot of good ideas, worked very well with Mullen as the quarterbacks coach. We kind of expected him to leave. We thought he was going to go be a head coach somewhere, but at the very least, we were expecting, he was going to be a guy that wasn't going to be on the staff long term, just because of how talented he is. We're lucky to have had him. And in his place is Garrick McGee. He's a former offensive coordinator at Arkansas, at Louisville. Louisville. Please don't skewer me for my pronunciation. My wife does it enough. So he was a former head coach at UAB as well. We won't talk about that one as much, but he was a off-field analyst for us last year. So he's familiar with the program. He's familiar with who we're targeting. He's familiar with our coaching staff. He's familiar with Mullen, and he, from everything we've seen, it's been a good addition. He slid in seamlessly. A big gripe amongst our fan base is still the lack of off-field analysts that are in our program. Georgia and Alabama, the two best recruiting schools in the SEC, have tremendous, well-fleshed out infrastructure in terms of their off-field analysts. So we all see that, and that's a huge part of recruiting. It's a huge part of game planning. And so that's something that hopefully, we'll get that resolved. Seems like we're heading in the right direction with that. So that's it for our off season. It's thankfully been quiet. We kind of, faded away. We didn't burn out. Well, it definitely ended with a whimper for us this past season. A lot of people were kind of off put by Mullins punting essentially on the Cotton Bowl. It wasn't a great look. I didn't really care too much. Kyle Pitts wasn't playing. Trey Grimes and KT set out. Cal Trask should have set out. I think Cal Trask definitely hurt his the shine that he had this season and probably damaged his NFL chances a little bit. I don't think they'll look too much into it. But we got to get a good look at our freshmen. Didn't look good. It's they clearly were not comfortable in the offense. They clearly were not ready for that moment. It's kind of bowl games have become so meaningless in the past 5 years or so that I put zero credence into the results. Unless, of course, Georgia or FSU losing one, and then they're very funny all off season. I think that this coming year, so just to kind of give a recap, I wish I had Mitch's graphic here. Maybe I'll bring it out next time. But we're losing a ton of production on the offensive side of the ball. Obviously, Kyle Pitts, Cal Trask, Kadarius Toney are all probably, Kyle Pitts is a top 5 to 10 or a top 5 or top 10 first round pick. I've seen Kadarius mocked as high as 11th, somewhere into the 20s is usually what I've seen for him. He's a guy that you just get the ball and good things happen, and NFL teams love that. And then Kyle Trask, I've seen him anywhere between the end of the first round to the third round. So I think, meet in the middle, second round, third round pick. I'd love to see him get picked up by the Steelers or, a team with a veteran, maybe even Washington football team. I wouldn't want him to do that to his career, but, the Steelers, maybe even the Saints, there's the Seahawks even. There's a lot of teams that have a lot of talent and could pick him up, draft him in a second, third round capacity, and either have a veteran who can play for a year and then become a cap casualty, or as we've seen all off season in the NFL with the salary cap being reduced by effectively $26 million. Essentially, it was a $16 million decrease, which is a ton of money, period. But then also with the opportunity cost to where agents, GMs, teams, players were expecting the salary cap to continue increasing at, about a $10 million a year rate, which is what it had been for the past, decade or so. Those two, you're essentially saying, 3 years ago when somebody signs a contract, they're expecting the salary cap to be at $205 million, and now it's $180 million. And that changes a lot of things. And that's why the Chiefs, they had to cut both their starting tackles. We're seeing high quality starting veterans get cut all over the NFL. Quarterback is one of those positions. The most valuable thing in the NFL is a quarterback on their rookie contract. Usually in the first year or two, that the quarterback position is going to be relatively clear as to who you have and who you don't have. More so than ever, we're seeing teams cut loose of guys after one season of not being the guy. I think that's the benefit of somebody like Pat Mahomes, who got a year, Aaron Rodgers, who got a few years. Some of these guys, they get the chance. They don't get Drew locked, to where they're a first round pick and they're thrown into a situation that's not very good and they don't do very well and then they're just garbage. it's not entirely fair to anybody, but I think a lot of NFL teams just don't have the patience anymore because they see what Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, these guys that have gone out and not just won MVPs, but also won Super Bowls on their rookie contract. Dak Prescott just got paid because he was making, $400,000 or $500,000 a year for the first 4 years because he was a third round pick. He didn't get, those increases, those guarantees that higher round picks get. But that's, as far as NFL goes, I think Sean Davis, of course, along with Pitts, Tony Trask, they'll be drafted. I think Stone Forsythe is a guy that probably a lot of people have never heard of, probably haven't really ever noticed. He was a solid left tackle for us, and he's a genuine, true 6'7", 320 type of guy with long arms, big hands. I think the NFL, I think the team will take a flyer on him in the 5th or 6th or so. I think Marco Wilson's going to get drafted. It's possible that he just does really terrible in his interviews and workouts and stuff, and that slips him out of that mid-range, 3rd, 4th range into undrafted. He's not that much of a sure thing. He was kind of a 2nd-round pick going into his senior year. Into his junior year. He got hurt in his redshirt sophomore year against Kentucky, tore his ACL, came back for his junior year, was decent, decided to let me come back again. That was this past year, and let me try and prove myself. We know how that went. There's probably a few other guys that I'm forgetting. Trey Grimes, he'll be drafted. We're losing Brett Hagee, who is our center. He probably won't be drafted, but he may make a team. Donovan Steiner and Brad Stewart, maybe if we can. I don't know why those two were always on the field together, but man, I do wish that we could just handcuff those two together for the rest of their career just to see what happens. So that's pretty much it for guys going to the NFL. So right now, Florida is sitting in the top 25 recruiting. We're sitting at number 24, just a wee few spots behind, Alabama. I think Alabama's like 15 or so after they just signed there. 14th. Arkansas at 18, Missouri at 19, Florida 24, Kansas at 27. All I can say is that it is March of 2021, and these kids won't sign until February of 2021. I have zero faith in anybody's 100% pledge anymore. I don't care how many times they say Florida is their dream school. None of it matters to me anymore because I've been spurned too many times. But that does not stop me from getting excited when we sign a good recruit. So, Florida's recruiting class had been small, and it's going to be a small class. But we had sort of our headliner was Sam McCall. He's a 5-star athlete, safety from South Florida. He was committed to us. When we fired both of our secondary coaches, he backed off his pledge. And then a few weeks ago ended up committing to FSU. So that stings, definitely. That never feels good. We'll see December and February, I'll sweat more. So currently we have 5 commits. We had Francois Knowlton and Savion Ellis, a defensive end and wide receiver. They were both 4-star guys. We had them committed. But in this past week, our momentum picked up. It's really the first news we've had all offseason in terms of commitments or anything since McCall decommitted. And it started off with 4-star offensive tackle Tony Livingston. If you look at 24/7, he's actually listed as a tight end. Some places have him listed as an athlete. He is one of those guys that was 6'6", 250, played tight end for his high school team because of, there's not many 6'6" guys. And then this past season, when everything was shut down, recruiting kind of ground to a halt. But he's a guy who transitioned to left tackle for his team from tight end and he is very, very talented, very athletic. He's a guy who I think could climb the boards now that his position has kind of settled in, because recruiting services love to see, and it comes from the NFL, these guys that former tight end convert. You gain 30 pounds of muscle at 17, and you go from 6'4", 240 to 6'7", 270 or so. And then everybody says, oh, this guy can play tackle, and he'll be 6'6", 6'7", of 310, just solid muscle. We see guys like Charles Cross at Mississippi State, Nicholas Petit-Frere. I know I butchered that, but bear with me here. At Ohio State, he was a big Florida target back in McElwain's last year. It's a guy that Greg Schiano actually was sort of a mentor to. They had a personal relationship with the family from their time when Schiano was at the Bucs. He knew, I forget all the details, but Schiano definitely closed the deal on that one, and then left next year, as coaches are prone to do. But those guys that are slender and lean, but they have long arms and huge hands, and they're not maybe physically ready from the moment they step foot on campus, but after a year, it's so much easier to, in college weight rooms, it's easier to build good mass than it is to cut bad mass. And we've seen the recruiting rankings adjust to these sort of projects. I forget what the guy's name was. He went to Clemson last year, but he was a similar guy that was about 260, and he was a 5-star tackle. I'll have to look that up. But anyways, Tony Livingston, he is our first true, real, legitimate, this guy could be an NFL left tackle down the road if he develops correctly. He's the first guy we've gotten like that in quite a while. Probably maybe David Sharp was the last guy who kind of had that. And, he was drafted. He played left tackle for us. He played left tackle in the NFL for a little bit. So that's exciting for us. Then Nick Evers, our quarterback for this class, followed that up. I imagine he'll be the only quarterback we take in this class, just because we took 2 last cycle. We still have Emory. Excuse me. We still have Emory and Anthony Richardson on scholarship. They're in the room already. And then Jalen Kitna, son of John Kitna, and Carlos Del Rio Wilson. Different than the Quincy and Marco Wilson clan. This guy is from Georgia. They both are already on campus. So we already have 4. And so I doubt that we'll take more than 1. Nick Evers, as of this recording, is a 3-star recruit. However, he just won the Under Armour Skills Challenge over in Dallas as the quarterback MVP. I watched this film. He looks good. He kind of reminds me of Felipe Franks a little bit. He's a tall, lanky guy. He's not super shifty, but I saw him take a couple zone reads to the house. He doesn't look like a guy who's going to try and scramble off the pass. I need some water. But, he's not the Lamar Jackson, Emory Jones, Mike Vick type of guy. He's more of, kind of Russell Wilson-ish, but also, like I said, Felipe Franks. I think he's more of a long strider who can, Aaron Rodgers. That was the comparison I made, to where he's not going to, scramble for 25 yards, but he'll beat you to the sideline and get a first down. And in Dan Mullen's offense, having a guy who can make that kind of play, and more importantly, having a guy who's willing to just hold on to the ball on the zone read and take it around the edge and get hit. It kind of sucks, but if he can do that in Mullen's offense, he's going to get you to the NFL. He's going to get you prestige if you're willing to make that play. And Trask, he was willing to. We saw his knee brace. He had foot problems. Trask was not a spry fellow. So I think we're going to start seeing – I don't think we'll see another 4,500-yard passer anytime soon. But I'll be okay with a 3,000-yard passer if he also rushes for 1,500 yards. That's kind of my expectation. No, I'm just kidding. we just need a guy who can make the defense account for the extra person. And as great as Kyle Trask was, that was an area that he did not excel at, and it was an area to where defenses were able to game plan around it, and Mullen kind of had to unnecessarily adapt. So I'm excited for this. In terms of who we're excited about in this coming season, in terms of freshmen, the guy making the most noise right now, follow up on this stream. I'm going to, in the next day or two, do a really, a good 10 or 15 minute dive into this guy, Big Desmond Watson. He's the guy probably making the most noise, and it's kind of hard not to when you're 6'6", 420 pounds. If you get a chance, look at this guy. His thighs are the size of an oak tree. Obviously, he needs to shed some bad weight. This kind of goes back to what we were talking about. We actually, right now on our roster, we have two guys who kind of epitomize both ends of that spectrum. We at least on the defensive line, we have Gervon Dexter, who was a freshman. He was our highest ranked recruit in a while. He's a true 5-star defensive tackle, but he is, 6'6", 280, very lean, very, raw, strong. And, he's kind of your DeForest Buckner, if you want an NFL comparison. And then we have Desmond Watson, who, he's, Vince Wilfork. Give me all the Vince Wilforks. If we can get him in shape, get him to buy into the defensive scheme, I think that he's a guy who can fill that Kyrie Campbell to Daryl Slayton-sized hole on our defense. In the next year, thankfully, we hit the portal and we got Daquan Newkirk from Auburn and Danny Shelton from Penn State. They both are big, experienced defensive tackles who, especially Shelton, he can be that space eater. That's an area to where we saw it last year. Daryl Slayton had all of the talent in the world. He was an athletic specimen. He could not, he couldn't play his role. Grantham needed him to be Vince Wilfork, needed him to be that athletic specimen on the inside. Too often, Slayton would see the quarterback, see the ball, and lose his assignment. And I think TJ is going to be drafted. I think he's a great player, and I'm glad we had him. He's not the only person on this defense that made this mistake, and ultimately when you have multiple guys making the same mistake, it comes back to the coach, but that's a different conversation. But we saw it with Kyrie Campbell and Adam Schuler, Marlon Dunlap. When we had guys on the interior who could play nose tackle and defensive tackle, our running game was solid. When we had Jabari Zuniga and Jonathan Grenard and Ja'Kai Polite and these Bucks who would set the end, our rush defense was solid. Our defense was solid when we had guys in position playing something they were natural with. I think this past year, with the worst defense we've had in 30, 40 years, we had a number of guys playing out of position just because there's a lot of hate. There's a lot of questions about seniority over talent when it comes to Mullen and Grantham and our coaching staff. And I think I don't buy it too much, but there is some credence to it. We've seen guys who are seniors getting playing time over guys who seem more talented, who seem to consistently make more plays, but don't get on the field because of they're not as experienced. Kadarius Toney may be the best example of that, to where his sophomore, junior year, everybody we just couldn't fathom why Mullen wasn't able to unleash Kadarius Toney in a Percy Harvin type of role, because we saw what he did with McElwain, and we saw, we follow the spring practices and we see the spring games, and Kadarius Toney, just for the past 3 or 4 years, was always part of those highlights and part of those plays. And Mullen comes in and he's this offensive guru, and it's why? And the first year, those questions abound. The second year, we saw it. After the first year of kind of having those open questions, you kind of started to see he wasn't running his routes correctly, and he wasn't a dependable player. And what was happening was, because he couldn't run his routes correctly, because he didn't stay within the framework of the offense, whenever he was on the field, defenses just keyed on him. And Kyle Pitts had a very similar thing, to where, because Kyle Pitts hadn't developed as a blocker fully, defenses would just key on him and Tony and just say, okay, if they're on the field, they're going to try and pass them the ball. They're going to put the ball in their hands. And it made it to where the defenses would double them, they'd key on them, and then nobody else would be open. And it limited our offense. But Tony and Pitts both made huge jumps going into 2020, and it made it to where they helped each other. When Pitts was on the field and Tony was on the field, no longer could you just say, they're going to give it to Tony on a jet sweep, or this isn't going to be a run because they have Pitts in there. He's a receiving tight end. It's going to be a pass. Obviously, our running game, you couldn't tell that he was there, but that wasn't really his fault. And that kind of goes back to why I'm excited about Emory. But I want to try and keep this right around 30 minutes, so I'm going to wrap this up. I hope that I was able to shed some light on some of the questions you'll have about the Gators. I will continue doing this. I want to get through at least our top 10 or 20 prospects that are on campus already. I really, really like this recruiting class, and I really like the last one. People don't like the fact that we are not in the top 5. There's a few guys that I'd like to talk about soon that are on our radar. Guys like Gabe Dindy, Jacoby Matthews from Louisiana. We aren't in on a ton of huge recruits, and that brings me, CJ Hawkins was the third recruit that we signed this past week. He's currently unranked on 24/7. I can promise you that by the end of this cycle, he will be a top 100 player. He's one of those true basketball to football type tight ends. He's 6'7", 220. He plays in a run-first offense, but he's already been killing it on the camp scene. He's a guy that, he had Georgia, Bama, Clemson offers. His mom, thank God, his mom was a Florida fan, and they grew up Florida fans their whole life. He's a really under-the-radar prospect right now that by the end of this cycle, I think everybody will know about. And I'm really happy that we were able to get him. Going back to kind of our targets, Gabe Dindy and Jacoby Matthews are both 5-star guys. Right now, Dindy is crystal balled to go to Oklahoma. He's a kid from Lakeland. Florida has historically cleaned up in Lakeland with, the Pouncey twins and Chris Rainey. The list goes on. I'm not going to, that pipeline has existed since at least Spurrier was around. And him going to Oklahoma, losing recruiting battles for defensive players to Oklahoma from our backyard, that's where Mullen really starts to run into issues, is because we felt like this should be cleaned up by now. We've dominated Florida State and Miami on the field. They haven't had nearly the level of success that we have. And it feels a little bit like Mullen missed a great opportunity to really, to unfortunately quote my brethren to the north, step on their throats with a hobnail boot. I mean, Florida State and Miami were both as low as, at least Florida State was. Miami was mediocre. But Florida State was about as low as they've been in anybody's lifetime. And to go through not one but 2 coaches since Mullen's been there and not have really made separation between ourselves, nobody likes to see that. We really should have put Florida State out for 5 years and just let them fester in the backwoods where they belong. Unfortunately, we didn't do that. So I still trust in our guys. I still like this class that we got coming up. We got to make sure everybody gets on campus, make sure that we don't have any more random Eric Gilbert Family Dollar tweets that turn out to be untrue. But yeah, I'll follow up with you guys soon. I'd love to start diving in. If you guys have a specific player, any specific questions, drop me a comment. I'd love to circle back on those. And if not, I'm going to start chipping away with our big man on campus, and I'll keep you updated on the recruiting news, any ongoings. But next stream, if you want to check it out, Desmond Watson, we're going to do a 10-15-minute dive into what he brings, what I've seen from him so far, and where he's going to fit into our defense. And we'll follow that up with probably Jason Marshall, who was our highest recruit. And he's a guy that a lot of people are excited about to have on campus. And he very well may be a freshman starter from day one. So I'll check in with you guys later and hope you have a great day.